Now, let's get to you, Andrew, here, because I love that, again, not only are you around the political types, but you go and do the door knock. I think this is one of the great things that you've brought to our coverage, apart from insight and all the rest of it, because you talk to normal people, right? And you get to see that immigration question, it can be sticky, right? A place like Wentworthville, 20 years ago, yep, Wenty Leagues was more of its cultural hub. 20 years later, and you would remember from the last time you went anywhere near the joint at the last campaign, or in many times in between, there's about 1 billion more units that are in there. The suburb has changed. Western Sydney has changed. So immigration, you've got to be careful how you talk about it. But Dutton did try to go out of his way to talk about the positives of the migration story. Just the number is the issue.
Yeah.
I think Peter Dutton won the debate. I thought it was his best performance. But I think it's of large concern to him, Paul, that he didn't win the vote. Because if he can perform that well and not win the vote amongst undecided voters, it's not a good sign. And I've got to say, the reason I will put this down to is Labor's winning the issues. So Trump was a question, health were questions.
Correct.
This is what Labor's campaigning on. Now, this becomes a chicken or egg question, by the way. Did Labor create this narrative, or did the focus groups create this narrative for Labor and they took advantage of it? But you didn't hear Peter Dutton talk about the threat from China, for example, or defence spending. He could have gone down that route. We could have got a question in relation to that issue. Those are his kind of issues. Where he was able to prosecute an issue really well, deficit and debt. The problem is that since COVID, people now have a different view of deficit and debt. And that was the clearest explanation he'd given yet as to why he's gone the fuel excise, a temporary targeted measure, as we saw during COVID, which doesn't harm the budget long term. And I thought that was a very strong argument. From my door knock here, really solidified by tonight, both times you saw arguments for migration in terms of they're concerned about how Peter Dutton will treat migrants, and against the massive amount of immigration, which I think a lot of Australians would think is just way over the top. Yeah. But these electorates have changed. Where I grew up, Paul, in Perth, has changed massively. It is much more multicultural, and that's where you get seats like Parramatta, Bennelong, Tangney. This is a different voting audience to when Tony Abbott won in 2013, and that is why you have to have a different approach if you're going to win the election. Now, ultimately, what's happened tonight will give Peter Dutton confidence. He's back in the game. We have a race, but he's still behind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's, dare I say, a stop the bleeding moment. And as you say, a scenario where if he's in, we were sort of trying to work out, OK, I mean, again, when your polls go up, they can go all the way to sky high, and when they go down, they can go down to zero, right? We don't know what the ceiling is and what the floor is, but we also know, and I mentioned it again, as I did with Kieran, the YouGov polling 1 month ago was 70 plus seats for the coalition. 1 month later, it's 70 plus seats for Labor. We've got 25 days, 2 weeks until voting starts. And Laura, you've mentioned this in your coverage, which is there is a huge sway of Australia that is not counting the grains of sand on the beach like we do all day, every day. They're the people who have just got other stuff to do. They'll make a call, they'll make it at the end, and if they get asked by anyone, they'll probably repeat the latest ad that they saw.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's going to come down to the last couple of days of this campaign. I don't think people are engaged yet. They will engage around this debate because it has engaged them. This is the first moment in the whole campaign that has tried to engage Australians. I think both parties, both campaigns haven't done that to date. But look, we're about to go, we've got campaign launches this weekend, then we go into Easter, then we go into Anzac Day. People are going to tune out once again. So this is going to go in waves, and it is completely unpredictable. What I think the Liberal Party and the Coalition haven't done well is that they've neutralised a lot of those big issues that came up tonight on health and education in particular. When it comes to dual nationals, I think, Peter Dutton's going to have to figure a way to neutralise that. But on unis and housing, the two major parties are basically there. I think it's really telling, Paul, what's not asked. And the work from home issue wasn't actually asked by an audience member tonight. It was asked by Kieran, rightfully so. I'm not discounting that it's not an issue, but I mean, I thought Albanese's answer to that, and he won't engage in this question that's been put to him twice today now about Chris Minns wanting to get people back in the public service. He did that at the end of last year. So there's a real conflict there between voters, yes, that live in the outer suburbs and do want to work from home, and you know, business owners that want to get more motivated staff to get back into their workplaces. The other thing to note here is there's a lot happening under the surface. I know of dozens of schools that now have composite classes from year one, because there's not enough teachers. This is after 3 years of a Labor government. So, you know, how is that going to play out in this whole campaign? And energy. I mean, you saw me, Paul. I was out in New South Wales seats that are consequential all last week. Energy is number one. And I think Peter Dutton knew that tonight. His opening statement was, remember the voice, and also remember that $275. And tomorrow will be the gas reservation policy, the modelling on that. It is very modest from what I've heard and from what I've seen so far. But if he can sell this, look, we're not going to make that same promise of, you know, you're going to get a cut in your power bill like Labor did, because we can't make that promise. But what we're going to do is, you know, just stop the bleeding on energy prices. If he can sell that, I think he goes a long way from here.
Yeah, you get the sense, don't you, about the way these guys, the practiced fighter goes, all right, I don't want to say anything that hems me in and gets used, like there will be no cuts to, stuff, or there will be no carbon tax, or 275 that just haunts you for another 3 years. So, okay, they're not giving us an answer. That's because they don't want that answer to be used by, you know, little old me, whacking away over and over again because, well, surprise, surprise, you know, it used to matter that you held your promises in. One quick one before we finish, and then I want to show you guys some data to give you both homework in your coverages for the next little while, because you're better at this than me and the best in the business, but it still doesn't mean you can't take a suggestion from the man cave. Firstly, Andrew, like everyone, your text messages go bing, 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 all the way through. Tell me the hard spin from Labor, the hard spin from the Libs. What was the moment where they went, aha, aha? Tell me.
Well, they were on about the Medicare card on the Dutton side, and fair enough, and I think I responded back, do you think this is my first rodeo, Paul? Look, I will say this about, and that was a good moment. Look, he did counter that. They're obviously ready for it. I just want to say something about work from home from my Parramatta door knock. People in the outer suburbs care about work from home. They see there's a reason why Peter Dutton apologised and reversed, which is pretty much never happens in a campaign, is that there's no doubt a bunch of Liberals out there door knocking and hearing it everywhere, particularly on a Monday like when I was out. And basically, the problem with saying that everyone in the public service needs to go back 5 days a week is that you're basically calling a whole lot of young mums who are juggling 2 kids and a job and everything else, and they just want to work from home 2 days a week, bludgers. So that is why he had to do that. It was a disaster, in my opinion. And Chris Minns might do it. Is it a different stage of the electoral cycle? I do note that their policy is the preference is you come into the office. It's not you're forced to come into the office, which is what Jane Hume came up with. And I don't think Peter Dutton is very happy with Jane Hume for this policy, I will tell you that. Because it is a distraction. And work from home is massive in the outer suburbs. And guess where they're trying to win the outer suburbs? And I have been told they were ahead in Eden, Monero and Robertson. It doesn't have to be a scare campaign, Laura, because the bottom line is people say if you're going to do it with a public service, you're going to do it to me. And they really value that. So, look, I think that was a massive mistake. We'll reflect back on that and the Trump moment. He's reset tonight in a good way. He needs to keep going. He managed to stay off those subjects. He said he'd stand up to bullies around the Trump issue, and that was a good line. And so I think he's able to get back in the race. And just one final thing, Paul. A Liberal Party strategist did say to me around 6 weeks ago that they have never seen, and we saw this in the poll, a larger soft vote than you have at the moment, which is what is giving them hope they can still pull this thing off.
Yeah, and which brings me to the homework, right, which is the essential poll in the Turnbull Times, The Guardian. It shows that the undecided vote recorded with them is sitting at about 13%. Why do I bring this up? Because I want to drill down a little bit about where does it hide in the polls. According to them, it's 12% of blokes, 16% of women, a higher undecided factor with women right now. When it comes to age groups, where are they? It's 17%. In the youngest voting cohort, in the middle of the country, 14%, 10%, 55 plus. But this is the bit I want to mention. When all of us hear polls about the minor party or the independent vote, 20% of people who say they have not made a decision about who they're going to vote are hiding in independent or other party. So this is really interesting, Laura, because everyone's saying, well, there's going to be this giant surge for Teals. One Nation is overperforming in national polling right now. But according to that poll, 20% of people putting their hands up to say none of the above, those are still undecided. So fascinating to see that that's where they hide when it comes to a pollster.
Yep, and people like Lee are going to benefit from that, and she is now, you know, the safe Labor seat is now solidly independent with Lee. The other thing to consider here is I don't think this undecided necessarily benefits Dutton at all, and you had this from the room tonight, and I spoke to at least a dozen of these undecided voters as they left the Wenty Leagues Club, and they were the ones that were on the fence were like, yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. Okay, they're not embracing Albo, but they're not necessarily a direct swap to the Liberal Party, and that's the thing that should worry the coalition at the moment. I think broadly, at the moment, the Teals are pretty safe. Looking at the brand that they've got, but those community independents are the ones that are going to make the inroads. For example, in Fairfield, I know there is an independent there who is really buoyed about how much support they're getting in the community, because there is a lot of disdain directed to the Energy Minister's way. So, I mean, when you look at Western Sydney more broadly, you're talking about an area, and, you know, there are areas outside of Melbourne and Brisbane and all of our capital cities that do represent this, but you're talking about, you know, 2 million or more middle class voters. Do they think their lives are better off than it were 3 years ago? You saw the hands raised in this room. This is what this campaign is about, nothing else. It is housing at the centre of that, energy and health. Everything else is going to be fringe. So it's all about discipline, staying on that message for people that aren't listening right now, and it's going to come down, I think, to the last 4 days of the campaign.
It's why I'd bring back for 10 million workers a load of middle income tax offset, but I've been on about that for 3 years. Thank you, guys.